The title of my sermon is When Heaven and Earth Intersect. When heaven and earth intersect. If I can put it into question, what happens when heaven and earth intersect? What happened? And that is basically what we're going to be talking about today. It was the year 2020 when my family and I decided to went up north all the way to Portland, Oregon. We explored the place, since it was our first time to visit the place. It was beautiful. Those of you who have been to Oregon, it is one of the most beautiful states in America, right? So we went to Mount Hood, if I can remember it correctly, right? We did camping there, for I believe 3 days with my family. So we explored the places and we even crossed the bridge to the, Seattle, Washington area, in that area, right? It's our state of Washington area. But we did not drive all the way to Seattle, right? But of all the places that we visit, it was the Japanese garden that really caught my attention. Those of you who have been inside the Japanese garden in Portland, Oregon, can attest to what I'm saying. It is a beautiful place, right? It's kind of costly a little bit to get in, but man, the place is beautiful, right? It's beautiful. And while we are inside, I exclaim I use this word to describe it. In fact, my kids were laughing at me because, after seeing this place, I said to my family that I feel like I am in heaven. I feel like I'm in heaven, with all this beautiful landscape, the trees, it's everything, the nature. It's so beautiful, right? That's why I said it's like heaven. The thing is, every time we go to a beautiful place and have this extraordinary time, we always use the word heaven to describe it. Or sometimes we use the word cloud nine, right? Not cloud nine. Oh yeah, it's cloud nine. We are in cloud nine. No, I thought of, is it cloud nine, the candy? No, not the one. Not the one, right? But it's like, I feel like I'm in a cloud, right? So, yeah, that is basically how we describe it. But although we haven't not been to heaven nor even seen it, we always associate beautiful and extraordinary experiences with heaven because of what we know about the real heaven, right? But when you talk about the earth or the world, right? The world in which the earth is a part of, it is basically the opposite, right? It is basically the opposite. Well, we can actually find that, in the book of, in the Bible, in the book of 1 John chapter 2, verse 15, and not only in this particular text, but all throughout the Bible, that when it comes to describing the earth or the world, it is the opposite of heaven. While, if you look at the Bible, it was created perfectly, but because of the presence of sin, this place becomes an undesirable place to live in, right? If you go to 1 John 2:15, it describes the world. That's why we are told not to love the world, neither the things that are in the world. It mentions about the desires of the flesh. It mentions about the desires of the eyes and the pride of life. And these are not from the Father, according to 1 John 2:15. So this is basically how the Bible describes the world, which is the opposite of heaven. So given the big gap in its natural physical beauty and the morality of it, it seemed impossible for heaven and earth to be together and intersect. But once it intersect. How would that be? What would be the picture? Because it made possible by Jesus Christ himself. Right? It made possible, in our mind it's impossible, but through Jesus Christ it became possible. Heaven and earth intersect. The result is what? Jesus Christ. He made it possible. By looking at the life of Jesus, it started with his birth, right? His birth made it possible. His arrival marked the intersection between heaven and earth. And if you look at the summary of the life of Jesus, from the very, very start, his birth was met with a threat to kill him as a baby. And his life has ended with his body suspended in the air between heaven and earth because of the sacrifice that he made for you and for me. And in between these two big events in the life of Jesus, he gave us an example on how to live a life of a person who is becoming an intersection between heaven and earth. And the good news, my dear brothers and sisters, is he is asking you and me to be participants of this task. Jesus paid the way. He gave us an example. And now he is inviting you and me to be the intersections between heaven and earth. A thing that seemed very impossible in the past, but through Jesus Christ, he made this possible. That's why in the book of Matthew, we were taught, and in fact, it was given first to his early followers when Jesus Christ said, when he taught them how to pray, he taught his followers, right, by saying, when you pray, say this: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on what? On earth as it is in heaven. What is the implication of this text, my dear brothers and sisters? He was saying that whatever should be done on earth, in heaven, should also be done on this earth. There's a very interesting story in the book of Genesis chapter 28, where it talks about the story of Jacob. In this chapter, you'll find Jacob leaving Beersheba, and he was on his way to where? If you can remember, he was on his way to Haran. And on his way to Haran, he got tired because it was dark already, it's getting dark. So he decided to rest. He took a piece of stone and used it as his pillow. And while he was resting, that is the time that he received a dream from God. And this dream is about angels going back and forth from heaven and earth on a ladder. Now the question is, what is the significance of this dream, my dear brothers and sisters, in relation to the text or to the topic that we are talking about? Listen to this, folks. Jacob's dream at Bethel of angels ascending and descending the ladder draws his eyes to heaven, where he sees God and hears his promises. And then back to earth, which he can see differently because of his encounter with God. So this is God calling us to fix our eyes. He is calling us to have this experience of Jacob. Even though we don't have the dream, but he wants us to have that same experience where he wants us to fix our eyes upward or heavenward, to contemplate the promises he makes to us, and then back to earth, so that we can engage this world with hope and a sense of purpose. And for me, when you talk about it, especially in the season where we are, this is basically the message of Christmas. This is the reason why we have this celebration, right? The message of Christmas is what? It is about love. It is about love, my dear brothers and sisters. The message of Christmas, or the message of this season, is about giving the world a reason to hope. Right? And when you talk about giving the world a reason to hope, we are not just here to tell people to hope. Let me say it again. We are not here to just tell people to hope. But we should give them reasons to hope. You know, I always like reading stories in social media. You know, I'm pretty sure you experienced this. You've probably seen like a story of a good Samaritan in which this person have done something good in the community, right? And as you scroll all these comments down, at the bottom of this big story, you would find there people that would say, which I saw a lot, they would say, man, this story or this very act of this Good Samaritan restores my faith and hope in humanity. How many times have you heard this statement? Right? How many times have you heard of this statement? So this is basically what I'm talking about. We are not here just to say to people around us, especially those people who are in despair, those people who are struggling, those people who are down. We are not just here to say you have to hope. You have to continue to anticipate because there's a coming king that will establish his kingdom. We are not just here to say to hope, but we need to give them reasons to hope. There's one story in the book of Acts, chapter 1, where you can find there the story of Jesus ascending back to heaven. All of us are familiar with this story, right? And while he was ascending back to heaven in the clouds, riding in the clouds of heaven, his disciples were there looking at him, right? Looking at him. They were looking intently as the sight of Jesus vanishes in the clouds, right? When suddenly, according to the text, two men appeared and said in verse 11, this is what the two men said, which are the angels, right? They said, "Man of Galilee," they said, "why do you stand here looking into the sky? This same Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven." Now, we've read this many times, my dear brothers and sisters. But what does it mean by this statement? For me, when I read this, it's like the angels were telling the disciples and telling us as well, not just to look up to heaven and to continue to anticipate. The angels are telling us, hey, don't just wait. Don't just continue. Do something. Right? Do something. There's a work to be done. Instead of you just stare up to heaven, you have to go back to the community where you're from. And you have to continue the work that God or Jesus has started. My dear brothers and sisters, this sermon is a call for all of us to be like Jesus, just like the song says. To be that intersection between heaven and earth. The intersection of heaven and earth is not always marked by thunderous events. Often, it is a quiet whisper, a gentle nod, an invitation to experience the divine in the ordinary. The intersection of heaven and earth unveils itself oftentimes in the quiet moments and ordinary places, reminding us that God's presence is not confined to grand gestures, but resides in the details of our lives. The intersection of heaven and earth is not a distant event. It is a daily occurrence in the choices that you and I make, the love we share, and the grace we extend to others. Every act of kindness, every expression of love is a testament to the intersection of heaven and earth, where the eternal touches the temporal in the most profound ways. That's why, my dear brothers and sisters, this season of Advent, the text reminds us that unto us a child is born. Unto us a son is given. An invitation not just to be in the intersection, but an invitation to be the intersection of human and divine. To give love instead of just saying that there is love. To be the hope rather than just point them to the future hope. To be that little heaven in this sinful, chaotic world. This is who we are. This is what we do. And this is the message of this season. May God bless us today.